I've had a number of students ask me about tariffs and what the implications are for tariffs and supply chain. So I thought I'd record just a little video going through a basic understanding of tariffs are and the implications of that when it comes to purchasing and procurement. Let's just take a very simple example and walk through it. So if we look at a car, for example, and we break it down into three different components, we got wheels, an engine, and a frame, and then we assemble the car. Each one of those steps has costs built into it to be able to purchase the materials, assemble the materials, and then profit for the company that's doing those different phases. So we'll just basically take and walk through an example where we go through theoretical countries that supply these different products and what it would do if we added a tariff. So just creating a baseline condition. Right now, the wheels are sourced from the United States of rubber, where it's cheaper to grow these products. It's $30 of materials, $10 of labor, $10 of profit, and then it's $50 to purchase those wheels. They also need to import some different materials to grow the rubber trees, so they have to import some of the cost of materials. The chassis is sourced from the Democratic Republic of Design, where people know how to make beautiful cars. Similar price structure for all these different things. $30, $10, $10, and final price of $50. And they import metals. And we have the engine, which is sourced from the union of putting stuff together, which is cheaper there because people have tiny hands, and so they can assemble things easier. Right, so $30, $10, $20, and $50. And then we have the total car. The final car is assembled in the union of heavy metal, which is a place where labor is very cheap because they play rock music at all the factories, so people are happy to work there. And if we add up all those different component prices, we have $150 of the materials for the three different parts. We have $50 of labor to assemble the whole car, and a profit of $50, and then a final price of $250, right? Okay, what happens if we now take that basic structure and add a tariff? Right now, we can buy the cars at $250. If we're running a business and we're trying to decide, hey, should we buy a new delivery vehicle to expand our market? We calculate out the time value of that. If it's $300 to buy a vehicle, then we would buy the car. We'd make $50 profit over the life cycle of that vehicle, and that'd be good for our company, right? So that's at the price point before a tariff. But what if we had a 20% tariff in the place that's purchasing these vehicles, right, where we are? Well, if we had a 20% tariff to any products that aren't in the Republic of Purchasing, now we can buy cars for $250, except instead of being $250, there's now a 20% tariff onto that. So what would that actually end up being, right? 10% is 25, so $50, so that's $300 now. So we can now buy cars for $300. Now if I buy that car for that same business model, it's a break even. It's exactly the same whether I buy the car or not, because I only make $300 over the life cycle of the car. I probably don't buy the car. If it's exactly a break even, there's risks associated with that, and so it's not as certain. So I probably just don't buy the car, which means I don't expand my market, I don't hire a delivery person, and I don't keep going with that business plan that was a potential. Right? Now, but wait, what if all the other countries don't like the fact that we added a tariff to all the products that were purchased? Right? We added a 20% tariff to all of their products. So what if they say, oh, let's do the same thing to protect their own industries? What happens if all these companies do that, right? Going back to the wheels, now the cost of materials is $36. Instead of being $30 of raw materials, there's a 20% tariff. So it's $36 to buy the ingredients to make the tires. It's $10 of labor time, and the profit's the same. So that's the same. And then the final price is $56. Same thing for the chassis. It's now 20% more expensive to buy the raw materials if you're sourcing them internationally. And the same thing for the engine. And then for the actually assembly of the vehicle, now instead of buying those products for $50 each, we have $56 each is the cost to those different companies. And we have to add a tariff now because we're purchasing all of those components from another country as well. So we have a 20% tariff on each one of those. And so the raw materials cost is $201. That $56 plus the 20% times 3. Add some labor, add some profit. Same as before, and now the final price is $301.06, right? But now we had to buy that car from that country that just made the car. So we can buy those cars for $361.92. Add 20% to the sale price or the cost to the other company after profits. And all of a sudden the price is very expensive. So we could buy them before at $250. Now we're paying almost 40% more than before for the same vehicle. Every company at every stage is making the exact same profit. And what's really happening is most of that additional cost is simply a higher effective tax rate on those same goods. The car hasn't changed at all. The profits for the companies haven't changed at all, but the consumers of the final product now can buy the same vehicle for 40 or some large percent more than before. So the easiest way to think about tariffs is tariffs are effectively just a sales tax on goods. So if there's a higher sales tax on those products, it's more expensive to buy them, you'll be less likely to buy those products. A tariff is a sales tax on any goods that are qualifying under the tariff, which tend to be international products. Now, if you think about how many products are international, that's basically everything that we buy, because America consumes a lot of products and we purchase most of those products internationally. And then we export a bunch of other products. So we export different products, different services, and other companies purchase those from us. So what America is very good at making is very different than what other countries are very good at making. What that means is we just buy and sell from other places to where it's more efficient to do those different things. So one area has a competitive advantage in this space, we'll buy it from there. Another area has a different competitive advantage in this space, we'll buy it from there. Because of that, we really need to just think about what's the total ramifications on tariffs if we implement them and have a tariff escalating trade war. I don't think it's a great strategy. I think it will increase the costs. It'll push a lot of the costs down to the consumer. And in the very short term, effectively what happens is if a company has an increase in their input prices, they're going to increase the cost downstream to the next company, right? And eventually that cascades down to the retailer, right? So it's kind of just passed through the entire industry. And there's a lot of more complicated math of how much gets passed through and how much tariffs and which things are being tariffed in which ways. But this is the very simple explanation of what the potential impact of tariffs could be, and probably why people are very concerned about escalating tariffs and tariff wars, because it ends up being pretty bad economically. Because now at the end of the day, if I wanted to buy a car at $361, it's just not worth it. I can't afford that for my company, and so I'm not going to purchase it. So the total consumption goes down, and my ability to use that for further purchases also goes down. That's kind of the highlight of it. How's it going to impact purchasing? It's probably going to have a lot of people scrambling to figure out, what do I do now that my input costs are up 20% or 40%, depending on where you're sourcing products from. In the very short term, you can't really make changes to fix that. You can't just immediately magically switch to a supplier. You can't just switch to a US made supplier if it doesn't exist, for example. One of the other things that we'll find is that when you're sourcing products, there's a reason we're sourcing internationally. It's usually because it's much cheaper to do so than to make it in America. For example, one of the projects I assigned for the sourcing class is to disassemble a mouse, take all the components apart, and price them out individually, find specific suppliers for that, and then create an estimate for the cost for that mouse. If you do that using the entire world, you'll find suppliers in different areas with different price points. A lot of them from Asia, because it's much cheaper to produce electronics in Asia. And a mouse at the end of the day, like the one that you buy from Amazon, tends to be like $1 or $2 total. And if you instead source all those components from US-based companies, the total mouse ends up being $15. And that's raw materials. That's just to buy the materials to put the mouse together. And if it retails on Amazon for $7, then that's not a very cost-effective way to source products, because we don't make it the cheapest here. We don't have the electronics capabilities. We don't have the manufacturing for that specific technology. And honestly, I don't think we want it. I don't think we want to go back to making circuit boards when we can have jobs that are much higher level, more interesting, more service level outputs, stuff where we can add different value. Right? That value is already being met somewhere else. So it's very expensive to source through the United States for many things. And even that $15 mouse that's sourced to the United States, that still tends to be made internationally because those different components that you're paying 200 or 300% premiums for because they're US made are still sourcing internationally. So they're still sourcing the raw materials or the components or the wires from international sources. They're just adding a premium for the US labor costs in the US market. That's a 200, 300% markup because it's made in the United States. So I don't see it happening where you can actually pull back enough of the manufacturing that matters, especially because at these types of rates, you're not going to find that trade-off where it's effective. So, in short, I have some concerns about the new tariffs. I don't think we should try to escalate a trade war with the world. I think one of the coolest things about the world that we have is that everyone is good at doing different things, and that's where purchasing is awesome. If I want to buy something from somebody, I'd rather go to somebody who's good at making that thing, someone who's better at making things than I am. And that's why outsourcing is awesome, is because I don't have to be good at this thing. I can hire someone who's good at that. And I can be good at the thing that I'm good at. And most companies tend to do that. Like if you take any of the big companies, Nike doesn't make most of their stuff. They have other factories that are good at making that stuff. Nike's good at marketing. And so they spend a lot of money, a lot of their time on marketing. And they build relationships with athletes. And they do all the stuff that Nike's very good at. And if you take Walmart, they don't manufacture any of the products that they sell, right? They outsource all of them and they buy those things because Walmart's not good at manufacturing things. They're good at buying things very cheaply and using the relationships that they develop with suppliers to get lower costs. And so that's what Walmart does, and that's how they specialize. And the supply chain allows us to take advantage of those differences, to be able to increase what we deliver, like add a lot of value in the way we want to, rather than trying to control the entire supply chain and trying to manage the entire system all at once. We tried that, and it was pretty effective for a while when all those systems were inefficient. But now that all the systems are relatively efficient, we get a lot more value from the relative competitive advantage of different companies in different spaces doing what they're good at. And that's why we've seen a lot of the vertical integration kind of phase out, where companies don't own the entire supply chain from raw materials to the finished Ford car. Now Ford sources most of those components because other companies are better at making those parts than Ford is, which makes the cars much better than the Model T. Hopefully that was a useful take on tariffs. There's a lot of implications that has it. What I showed you was very simplified form of it, right? So hopefully we see some of the tariffs be not quite as extreme as that's 20% across the board, because I don't want to end up paying $360 for a $250 car. And I don't think companies will be most profitable in that space either. All right, thanks for listening.